Hey everyone, Adam here, So It Was Your Podcast, and I have another interview for you today. I got to sit down with David Banks, who has worked in comics for a really long time in various capacities, and he's undertaking this really cool project, which he's done a lot of these kind of things in the past. He goes through a lot of the major titles he's done, shows off a lot of his printed works, which is really cool. But his latest endeavor is he is taking on a 3-year mission to totally restore, rejuvenate, and revive the Micronauts comic series. David goes into all the details, not just on the Micronauts, but the other series he's done, the people he's worked with, what happens with these projects, what could potentially happen with them. It's a really cool, unique process, a really cool interview, and he even does some screen sharing to give us a first-hand look at what it entails. Enjoy the interview. Hey everyone, Adam here, So Was Your Podcast. I'm sitting down with David Banks to talk about, his career in comics and also his newest endeavor of restoring the Micronauts. How you doing, David?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. Thanks for coming on. This is cool. I kind of got your email. I'm not really even sure how you got a hold of us originally.
Well, I put out a notice to various podcasters that were following me, and somehow either you're following me or you saw a post and you sent me a note, and we followed up from there.
Oh, very cool. Okay. Joey does the social media, so that's why. But that's awesome. I'm glad it worked out because I think it's really interesting. Before we get to your huge project, which will probably be the bulk of the conversation because it's a 3-year undertaking, do you just want to kind of give like a brief history, maybe like your highlights of your multiple decades in comics?
Sure. It's kind of been long. It's a long story, but starting in 1979, I used to have, I started having all my personal comics made into hardcover books. And what happened from there is that people asked me to start helping them make them into books. And I represented a couple book binderies for a while. And then I moved on to what I call scan and bind projects, which are you take a bunch of comics, you scan them, you print them out, and you have them bound into a book. So it's not using the original issues. These are scanned and then printed and then sewn and put into a hardcover book.
Okay, just for your personal collections?
Personal collection, and then people would beg me for copies. So, I only made 10 copies at a time. And then as time went on, I started taking those scan and bind skills and learned how to use Photoshop to restore comics digitally, which means that I take a high resolution scan of a page, and then I began to electronically clean up the page by like cleaning out the gutters, so there's no artifacting between the panels, for example, and then start eliminating what I call bleed through from the other side of the page, which is a big problem for a lot of scan projects. And I started creating what I called what if books. So, for example, what if the GC Style Gut, the Akira Volume 6? That's a project where Graffiti Designs published volumes 1 through 5 of Akira, reprinting the epic Marvel series, but they never got around to finishing it. Well, what happened when you would finish it? And so I took almost 2 years, scanned all the remaining pages, cleaned it up, got dies made, dust jacket made, and created an exact complement to the other 5 volumes. Other recent projects have included the Wretch Omnibus. Phil Hester, I'm a fan of his work. This is his own character. This collects 25 years of Wretch stories from various publications, plus a new story. So I got to rescan all his original art, clean it up, and then make this volume. And then as a follow-up, I helped him and Paul Tobin collect their early 90s series called Fringe, and did the same thing, took the art, cleaned it up, assembled it. So, my main strength over the years has been a production guy. In my day job, as well as my second job of comics, I've always told people I'm the bass player. I'm the guy that cleans it up, organizes the pages, does test printouts, and we go from there. I've done things solo, but I've also worked with Tim Benson at Omaha Bound. And Tim's a great idea guy. And in fact, I never would have known who Phil Hester even was if it wasn't for Tim, who's much younger than I am. And so he has a different perspective on comics. I mean, I grew up where it was Jack Kirby, Gene Colan, John Buscema. Those were my favorite artists. I never had heard of Phil since he started out in the 90s. So I retired a couple of years ago, and I decided that I wasn't going to sit around in retirement. I would give myself an assignment. And one of the projects I had done a couple of years ago was called ROM, where I scanned all the pages and cleaned them up. And some of the work makes me cringe, and some of it I really like. And so I decided I would do the same thing for the Micronauts, but I would bring everything to bear, that every single page that came out would be crisp and clean, and yet it wouldn't be recreated, it would be restored. And so over the last few years, I've learned how to be a better restorer by taking my time page by page, working on things. 6 months ago, I decided to start posting examples of what I was doing on the project in my little Twitter account. And I'm getting more and more notice for that and more interest of it. It's this project isn't a profit project. This is what I call a fan project. If it gets picked up officially, that would be great. But on the other hand, what the end result is going to be is that I'll probably make a 4-volume set with a slipcase, and that'll sit on my bookshelf. But also I'll have a book, a how-to book on how to restore comic books in the pre-digital age, because I've been taking careful notes and keeping careful images as I go along the way. And I'm also creating a series of 1 to 2 minute videos demonstrating each technique doing cleanup. So that's my opening spiel.
Yeah, it's so interesting. To kind of take it back a couple steps, you just started doing this purely for your own, I'd like to have this on a hardcover on my shelf, and like kind of friends and word of mouth spread it a little bit.
Right.
So are all of these passion projects, like you're only doing titles that you're personally interested in?
Some have been and some haven't. Fringe and the Wretch were about what I call non-passion projects. These were projects that needed to be done, and they've been the artist and the writer have been selling copies of them, and so they're fully published comics. I did the restoration work for a series called Aztec Ace back in 2018, of all things. That's when the Kickstarter finished. It's finally coming out from Dark Horse in August of this year. And that I did all the restoration work on that. And that was designed and laid out by the same guy who does Comic Book Creator magazine for Tomorrows. So some of it's what I call spec work or fan work, and others real work. Because what I found out is that every time I'm working on something, somebody says, "Well, that's great, Dave, but could you help us out over here?" And every band needs a bass player.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So I'm the bass player.
So
for example, I worked on Cullen Bunn's Passion in Black. I did the production work for that Kickstarter, where it became a softcover anthology horror stories, comic book horror stories.
Okay. Yeah, I actually saw that on Kickstarter. But then something like Akira was just done as a fan. I just want to understand it correctly.
Correct. Now we have the contact information for the owners of the intellectual property. We just haven't been able to connect with them to show this.
Okay.
And my opinion is that the people who bought volumes 1 through 5, there was 1,500 of them. Because it was a limited thing. Why can't they publish this? got all the files. As far as I'm concerned, they own it.
Right.
Gladly hand it over to them.
It makes sense. I mean, comic fans are collectors, if nothing else.
Yes.
I'm going
And
to finish that set.
well, they're completists, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Don't you hate it when something's not finished?
Absolutely.
They have a whole series of hardcovers and then they have one trade at the end. Give me a break.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. It's like, why bother doing it if you're not going to see it through?
Right.
That's really cool. And I think you might have covered it, but how originally did you decide to start doing it? Like, I know you started doing it for yourself, but kind of what was like the spark where you're like, oh, I can do this, maybe not better, but different?
Well, I'd like to tell you that they were always my ideas, but they weren't. You know, everything I've worked on for the last 20 years or even longer has been something that somebody else suggested. And I said, oh, I could do that. So for example, with this example I showed you here, the Machine Man book, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Jack Kirby's work wasn't collected yet in a variety of ways. So I decided to do a series of Jack Kirby books. So I did Machine Man, Black Panther, Eternals, and then 10 people helped finance it. And so somewhere in the world, there's 10 sets of each of the Jack Kirby books that we did. You know, and I was really into dies. I like to have fancy dies on the front.
Yeah, that's cool.
But then I became enamored by dust jackets because you could do so much more. So every project since then has had dust jackets. But I would like to tell you that they were my ideas, but they weren't. So I would be on forums and people say, well, it'd be nice if we had this particular collection. And I said, oh, I have all those comics. I could make that collection. And then I worked with a guy named Tim Benson, who still runs a little company called Omaha Bound. Tim is a fantastic idea guy. And it was great just sitting, listening to him, because he could spit out 5 or 6 ideas, and I would grab one of them and say, oh, I could do that. And I love to surprise him with stuff. So one of the things, we shared an office for about a year. Tim is a big Usagi Yojimba fan. And as I understand it, there was 16 color comics printed by Mirage Press in the early 90s. And Tim says, oh, that would be great. We should, talk to Stan about it and so on and so forth. And then we never talked about it again. But what Tim didn't know is that I scanned all 16 issues. I built the book and had it printed. And then I put it on our bookshelf. And one day he's in the office and he notices it. He goes, what the hell is this? And he gets it down and he looks through it and he goes, oh, we got to send this to Stan. So we sent it to Stan Sakai. He was very gracious. He liked it. But he said he didn't have the rights to reprint. But he sent us some nice swag back, and he kept the copy that we created. So I'm happy to know that one of these is on Stan Sakai's bookshelf.
Yeah, that is cool. That's high praise.
Yeah, and now there's some projects we tried to do that never went anywhere. Have you heard of Saber?
I have not.
Don McGregor came out with this series called Saber. And it was done by 3 different artists over a period of time. And I did the same thing. I scanned it and we presented the idea of doing a collection. Well, I guess somebody else beat us to the punch. They're talking to him about doing a collection. So all I have is an uncorrected copy of that particular title. We never went to the next step, which is to clean up and reassemble a book. Have you heard of the DC Style Guide?
Yes, I have.
Jose Garcia Lopez, everybody loves him as an artist. That particular version of the Style Guide went ahead at the idea of one of my clients, said we should have this and give it to him for his birthday one year. Well, I got it made, took 6 months. I don't know if it ever got in the artist's hand. But from time to time, I show this off and people want to buy copies. And of course, if I start selling copies of something, I'm going to get in trouble. So I don't.
Right. That was a question along the way.
Yeah, no. I call these what if books, and I hope that they get picked up. And I'm not burdening it with the fact that what's in it for Dave. This is purely fan work I have the luxury of doing. So for another project, the Marvel Calendars book. I don't know if you're familiar that Marvel published calendars for several years in the 70s. And I collected it into a 12 by 12 coffee table size book. And this has been talked about on and off over the years. But recently, Chris Ryall, who used to be with IDW, has been talking about doing an official version with Marvel. So, of course, I sent him my copy of the book and gave him access to files so that they can decide if they're going to use what I've done or recreate it for themselves. So now the beauty of working with people is sometimes you get to do stuff that nobody else gets to see. Have you ever heard of what Phil Hester did for several years called the 97 Kirby's and then the 98 Kirby's?
No, I haven't.
Well, every year Phil would do a series of sketches on Jack Kirby's birthday. So when Kirby would have been 97, he did 97 sketches.
Wow.
Well, the year Jack Kirby would have been 100, I got to help out as far as I was scanning. I was there as they're live drawing them. And then I was there when they were inking them. He had a group of inkers. So I put together a book called The 100 Kirby's. There's about 5 copies of this floating out there. But it shows all the before and afters of the pencils and then the guest inker. There was like 5 inkers who worked on that.
That's pretty cool.
Well, I could talk for hours, so what can I answer for you?
No, this is all absolutely fascinating. This is fantastic. I guess to talk about Micronauts specifically, we could always, do have another conversation some other time and keep it broader. Why did you choose Micronauts? Was this one your choice, or was this a forum choice, or a?
This was a Tim Benson idea. He said you did ROM, and if you're not happy with how ROM came out, you could redo ROM. And I said, I don't want to redo it. I'm kind of tired of it. So then he suggested the Micronauts, and he suggested the Micronauts because it's one of those series that hasn't been reprinted because it was a licensed series to begin with. It's owned by Hasbro. Marvel licensed it. It's never been reprinted. And it's the kind of thing that had a wealth of artists who were just beginning their careers. Butch Juice, Kelly Jones, Ron Wingham. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Michael Golden. There was a whole group of people over the life of Volume 1 and 2 who were just starting out their comic book careers, and it's really interesting to see their efforts that they put into this. And then the story isn't that bad, to be honest with you. But the only thing that angers me about it is that Starfields are just a pain to restore.
I'm sure you probably go cross-eyed after a point.
Yeah, it's like, that's good enough,
Right.
But it was originally a Tim Benson idea, and the cool thing about Tim Benson when he and I get together is that I'll say, well, this is what I'm doing, and as I'm telling him that, he just spits out a couple extra things. So he was just over the other day, and I was showing him some of the stuff I was going in Google. It's, well, you ought to do this. So, for example, he wants me to lay in a layer on each page that simulates paper texture.
Okay.
Little comics, and that's a piece of cake. Easy thing to do.
Right.
I just haven't found the one I'm satisfied with. But he was only over 2 days ago, so
You gave yourself 3 years. You got some time.
So I have another year to go on the project. But
okay. And why did you choose 3 years? Was it just the sheer amount of work, or was it, I'm going to do this on the side, I'm not going to be doing this 10 hours a day?
Well, you're absolutely right. first of all, I didn't choose 3 years. I realized about a year and a quarter into it that it was going to take 3 years.
Okay.
So that's when I started telling people that. And then I try not to work more than 4 hours a day. Of course, my wife will tell you that's not true, but I try. You know, you can only spend so many hours out there before your hand cramps up or your eyes are like blurry or whatever.
Oh yeah, especially because you're probably zooming into insane levels to get every little speck and.
Yes, exactly. I mean, and I have a sample page. I don't know how to share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on part of it. So it fills in your screen. So can you see?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what I found with each of these pages as I've scanned and been working on them is that a lot of lines need to be reinforced, the panel lines. So that's one of the first things I do. So I'm going to click on that, see how it darkened up.
Yep. And now, are you drawing those outlines?
Actually, I'm selecting them and then reinforcing them. And in other cases, I have to draw them if they don't exist. You'd be surprised how many panels don't have complete lines on all four sides.
Right.
So it's a combination of things. And then the text, I'm going to zoom in on that so you can see. The text is, there's different ways to reinforce the text. So you go, see how it gets blacker? Yep. Using levels and stuff. But text can be a challenge because, let's see where the, look at some of this text. You see how the yellow is printed over it?
Okay, yeah.
I don't know why it's printed. So, you know, you have to reinforce that to make it black. And then, but then you have see-through behind the text. So I put some things there to help brighten it up so it pops back out. And then,
oh wow, yeah.
You see the in the yellow area here how there's bleed through.
Yep.
You know, you got to clean that up and do that. And sometimes I do that in channels, and sometimes I do it manually. Try to clean that up so that it looks better. And then some additional touch-ups. And then when I'm all done, I do, you know, I've been experimenting with color balances to make sure things don't shift. So I don't want the, you know, something that's blue to turn green, for example.
Right, yeah.
So then you see an example of a finished page. That make sense?
It does, yeah. That's a really cool process. And when you first started this, did you always do this in Photoshop?
Yes, I've always worked in Photoshop. In fact, I've worked in Photoshop since the day it came out.
Oh, wow.
Because at my day job, we had it there, and I'm guilty of stealing a copy and using it at home also for many years before I, you know, and before I started doing business with Tim, and we actually made a real company and bought software, subscribed to software. So
right. Did you like say reinforce the lines? Did you already know, oh, well, in Photoshop I can do this and this and it'll reinforce them all fine? Or was it, I know I need to reinforce these lines, what's the best way to go about it?
Well, I had some idea because I had done earlier projects. But then there's a guy, and I'm going to stop sharing this and I'll talk to you again. There's a guy in England called Alan Harvey, and he does comic book restoration. And I was observing some of the things he'd done and reading some of the interviews or some of the things that, how should I say, attributed to him. And I realized that I could add to what I was already doing by using some of his techniques. So along the way, I had kind of a false start on the Micronauts where I was about 3 months into it, starting to manipulate the raw scans. And I went back to the very beginning and started again using some of Alan's techniques.
Oh, wow.
So like I like to tell you, it's an original idea by Dave again, but it wasn't.
Well, there's no point in reinventing the wheel, right?
Right. But it's just, I think information is free. It's just who can execute with it.
Right. Makes sense.
And so I want at the end of this to share back with people who are interested in it. So that's why I'm doing a detailed how-to book. That's why I'm doing some videos, because some people aren't going to read the book. But if they want to see how to restore text in one little video, or if they want to see how to fix bleed through in another video, I think that we should share, and then the people that want to execute can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think even people who might not necessarily take the information and directly apply it and use it themselves, if they're collectors or comic fans, or especially if they like the old comics and they want the reprints, I know I personally would just be fascinated just to see the process, just to kind of get a look behind the curtain.
Yes. And I'd like to do a shout out to another person who 20 years ago, when I was first starting doing the Kirby things, is a guy named Chris Fama, Fama. And he specialized in scanning and recoloring Kirby romance comics from the 50s that are in the public domain. And some of the things that, some of his techniques that I use, I remember resisting them when I first started. So for example, I didn't want to spend a lot of time doing the scanning. I didn't want to do high resolution scans like he did. Normal resolution is 300.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing everything at 1200 so that he could clean it up pixel by pixel.
Wow.
And then reduce it back down. So when I started working with Tim Benson, I saw that 600 was a nice compromise. And the beauty of doing everything 600 is you can, if you decide you don't want to print at normal original size, you can do an oversized hardcover volume. And if you decide you want to grab elements, you don't have to worry about them deteriorating when you enlarge them, because they're already twice as large. They were scanned twice as large as the original.
Right. You can always go down. You can't necessarily go up.
Yes, you understand. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, that's smart, because if you did, hundreds of pages at 300 DPI and then someone wants a poster size book, it's like, well, you're out of luck, or it's going to be grainy.
Well, and that's my problem with ROM. I scanned it all at 300.
Oh, okay.
My success with Micronauts is everything's at 600 and all the covers are at 1200. So I'll have some pretty sharp things to work with as I design and create things.
For sure. Yeah. You must have a pretty powerful computer to hold all those.
Yes, I do. That's one of my toys that I buy for myself. And then I have 18 terabytes of storage.
Yeah, I was going to ask about your hard drives, and then your redundant hard drives for backup, and you must have a lot.
Yes, I have some that are in a safe in my home office, and I have two offices. If you go to singleboundstudios.com, you can see my upstairs office, and then I'm in my downstairs office right now because certain times a year I just like to be able to look out the window, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah. So, but at singleboundstudios.com, you'll see some other recent projects that I finished in 2020. So
that's very cool. Yeah.
But so what else can I answer for you?
I mean, I'd like to get into the nitty gritty if you have a few more minutes, or maybe.
Oh, I've got all the time in the world. I finished my quota of pages literally 10 minutes before I logged on with you.
Oh, actually, you're great at time management.
So what nitty gritty would you like?
Well, you kind of showed the reinforce the lines, the reinforce the text. How far do you go on the artwork itself? Because obviously you want it to be clean, but you never want to change anything that the artist has done.
Yes, and it's a case-by-case basis. But doing like Alan Harvey says, we restore, not recreate. I'm not going to start drawing over the original artist stuff. Are you familiar with Jack Kirby's work by any chance?
The big stuff, the superhero stuff.
Well, Jack Kirby's philosophy as an artist is that they would draw everything and then they'd come back and they'd spot the blacks. And I never knew what they meant until I started doing restoration work, because sometimes what you can do is if you make all the black parts perfect, it makes everything else pop out, and it's very forgiving that way. So I could show something like that if you wanted me to.
Yeah, sure.
I could pull that up on the screen. So let's see. Hopefully I won't get kicked out the next time.
I think it was just the permissions thing.
Yeah. So let's see if I have an example of black.
I think I know what you're saying. Would it be cool to see the process?
Right. Well, once you make this solid and then you back out to normal size, your eye is forced to the artwork. And like I said, it's very forgiving. Because a lot of times when comics are printed, the black areas, they don't come in solid. They come in kind of muddled.
Yeah.
I'll show you what I mean. Let's see. Okay, I'll show you what I mean about the blacks. You see how that's not solid print?
Yeah.
Okay. So remember we reinforced the lines.
Yep.
You see that, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then we put in some color for the text blocks. So we make that look good, but that still, you see the black kind of looks kind of crappy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even if you zoom out, you can still see that it's uneven in the background.
Right.
So what I do on pages is that instead of going in and trying to correct the artist stuff, the solid areas I feel like are fair game. So I'll drop in solid color. And then what happens when you zoom out, it looks much better.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
So I'm going to show you before and after. This is after. Here's before. So you asked, how far do I go? I stay true to the artist, but I figure, flat surfaces and solid areas are fair game. So look at his foot, for example. Can you see his foot?
Yep.
I'm going to zoom in on that. You see the bleed through here?
Yeah.
And you look at what he's sitting on, there's some bleed through. So if I just make it better, right? Without taking away from what the artist did.
Right. Yeah. You didn't even affect the shadowing you did, really.
Exactly. So then when you do the color correction, and I'm still experimenting with how much cream I want to leave in. You see how it blends everything together.
Yeah.
So I haven't really had to touch the artist's main stuff, but I've taken liberties with solid surfaces. Does that answer?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it also looks like it fixed the color bleed that the kind of older printing process used to do.
Yes, I that drives me crazy. It drives me crazy, especially when it does it into text boxes. So I'm going to turn off some of these colors so you see what I mean. This is ridiculous in my mind. There's no particular way you can fix this. Look how muddled it's not solid. You can't grab anything solid. That's why sometimes you have to literally put a screen in and then bring the text back in on top of it.
Yep. And the color there, do you like kind of look at the area and use the color picker on what you see as the majority?
Yes.
And then
I sample from
use...
I try to stay true to their colors. I'm not making up my own palette because I don't think I should recolor it. I don't think I should recolor based on today's standards. I think it should be colored the way it was colored.
Yeah, no, the coloring does, it is of the era.
Yes.
So now when you say that yellow for the credits panel there, or the blue for the dialogue boxes, would you use that exact same blue on every page, or do you redo the color picker thing so it's truer to the page than the consistency?
I redo every single page. I don't use the same color balance from page to page. I use what is that on that particular page. And I think it's just staying true to the fact that manufacturing standards of the comics changed over time. I see how the red just bleeds in. It just drives me crazy.
Right.
So, and that just is so much better. But it's easier to go smaller. By the time we get down to 300 DPI, you don't realize what I've done. But if it was there still, your eye would see it. But now it's gone, so it's not standing out as a problem.
Yeah, it's really apparent in the black that you were pointing out.
Yes. So imagine Starfields. Oh my God.
It's almost like you have to start over.
Right. So what else can I share with you? And here's the deal. Why am I talking about this now when I still have a year to go? Because I get a lot of questions. So I thought, well, maybe podcasts would allow me to help explain, and then it would be interesting to people for your audience too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I find it fascinating. We have a lot of comic fans in our audience. I'm sure they will as well. Mm-hmm. Plus, now people can be looking into your project. They can follow you on Twitter. They can check out your, Single Bound Studios. Yep. They can be in the know. So when this is ready to come out, you're not then just starting to push the boulder. You've already been doing it.
Yes. We've been having some fun with this project. We've been doing giveaways. The last couple of years, I've been downsizing because I'm at that age. Eventually, my wife and I will sell the house. It's too big for us. But we still have grandchildren come over all the time, and so we keep the big house. But as a collector all these years, you can imagine my own comic volumes and my own art that I collected and things like that. During these, one of the ways I've been divesting myself of this, besides selling stuff, is that we hold little contests. So, for example, I gave away a Marvel Calendars book, or I gave away various experiments for the Micronauts project. And all you had to do was be a follower and to enter in the raffle. And so we've had 4 contests already giving away fun stuff. But then I take it further because packing materials are expensive. I don't know what
shipping's expensive.
Shipping's expensive, but I have all the shipping I've done over the years. I'm still burning up my loyalty rewards. So I ship a lot of stuff for free.
Oh, wow.
But packing materials is expensive. And so I'll take a priority mailbox. I'll put what the person won in the contest. And then if I have any other excess stuff, I stick that in as bonus.
There you go.
So it's like Christmas when somebody wins one of our contests.
Yeah. So that's good for people listening. Go follow David Banks on Twitter. Get on the contests.
And so people will say, well, you gave me this and this. Was that a mistake? No, good. In addition to the thing that you really wanted.
Right. Very cool. Have you done any live streaming of while you're restoring pages?
No, I haven't figured out how to do that yet. I'm still, you're going to laugh, but my 12-year-old grandson is tech support for a lot of things for me.
Oh, that makes total sense.
And I've been teaching him Photoshop, and he's actually a better text restorer than I am. And so when he wants to work on vacations or summers, he comes and works in the studio. And so that's been fun to have him there, but he's a little bit of a distraction. And you can imagine a 12-year-old that has to have fidget time too.
Yeah, he's not going to be sitting there restoring 4 hours straight.
Yeah, exactly. He's running up and down the stairs to get himself a drink and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's cool that he's getting into it now, though, because he's going to be a Photoshop pro at 15, and he'll just keep going from there.
Yes, I agree. But there's been many times, like when I'm trying to install a new piece of software or I'm working on a new piece of equipment, and he goes, well, you need to do this. Like I couldn't get a hard drive to work initially because I was trying to put it into a hub. And he goes, no, Grandpa, you got to put it in the back of the computer itself. Put it in the back of the computer itself, worked fine.
Okay.
So shout out to Marcel.
There you go. The book you're doing on how to restore along with the restoration itself, is that coming out at the same time, or are you just kind of worry about that when your main project is done?
No, it'll come out when the project's done. The book will come out, and it will be a comic book. And right now I'm trying to keep it to a 64-page comic book published by Kablam. But if that doesn't work, then I'll switch the blurb and have that done as a trade book, a softcover trade book. And the reason I'm saying doing it that way is to keep the costs low. We don't need to come out with a $50 book. Why don't we come out with a $6 or $7 comic book?
That makes sense, yeah.
And since it's about comics, it should be published like a comic. But maybe that's not a good idea. At least that's the idea at the moment.
Right. So you're kind of doing double duty. You got the restoration and the how-to going at the same time.
Yes. I'm fortunate enough to have a couple editors in my life, a sister and a cousin, and they look my stuff over and they make it more readable as I go.
There you go. That's helpful.
I have this bad habit of putting the word "that" in a lot of different places that it doesn't need to be. So that was why we do this. You don't need that. This is why we do it. Yeah.
Everyone who's taken on a writing project, they have to evaluate their weird speech patterns and things that you don't even know you're doing. Everybody.
Well, they used to make fun of Jack Kirby's dialogue, and I thought it was just fine. So I think they would make fun of my dialogue too.
I think it worked out okay for him.
Yeah, it did turn out okay for him. But so it's a fun thing we're doing. The beauty of being retired is you get to do something fun as opposed to it has to be work. It has to be, the accountants have to be happy with the numbers, so on and so forth.
Right.
This is being entirely bootstrapped by myself. And I've just now started to sell little curiosities. Like I sold a little booklet. I didn't know if anybody would be interested, but I made a little booklet of all the covers from the series, page after page after page. It's just covers, 1 through 59 of the Micronauts, plus the 2 annuals, and then 1 through 20 of the second volume. And then at the end of it, all the covers for special appearances. So like the X-Men crossover with the Micronauts. And people like it. It's like a little 6x9 book that they can put in their back pocket for a few dollars, and then they can use it to have as a reference when they're going to look for the comics as they fill out their collections. So
yeah,
along the way, I'm experimenting with things. Another thing we're experimenting with is we're thinking about a Micronauts calendar for 2023.
Makes sense. You have all the artwork.
Right. I don't want to do the work. So I'm talking to another guy who's contacted me on Twitter, and I think I'll feed him the artwork and let him build the calendar.
That makes sense.
You got to know how much time you really want to spend on this. So
yeah, if you do every side bit too, you'll be the 5-year Micronauts project.
Exactly. Well, and you never know.
Right. It might end up that way anyway.
Yeah. So The cool thing about comics is that, all comic book fans are kind of bound together by various aspects of it. So, whether or not you're a collector of a particular character or series, whether or not you collect original art like Phil Hester does. I got to go to Phil Hester's house one time to deliver him some finished books, and he let me look at his original art collection. Now, here's the crazy thing. I'm a fan of inkers. I love to see how different inkers ink different artists. And one of the things about the Micronauts is that there's this one inker named Danny Buldaney, who's literally inked nearly every artist over that 70, 80 issue series. He's inked, Gil Kane, he inked Butch Juice, he inked Kelly Jones. I could go on and on. Howard Bender, Ron Wingham. And the beauty is that how he's kept the art in some ways consistent from artist to artist. Because there was this one little patch where it seemed like every couple issues the art team changed, except for the inker. The penciler changed every time, So,
yeah, that's a good point. That level of consistency would be nice for the reader.
Yes. Another consistency is, I don't know if you're familiar with a guy named Alan Milgram.
No.
He was an editor for a lot of, not most of the series, but also when they didn't have somebody who could ink, he would sit there and ink the story too.
Oh, wow.
So there's different things. So I'm thinking about just doing a little book of examples of every artist that Danny Buldaney inked.
Yeah.
Here he is over such and such and such and such. And the stuff is beautiful. The stuff is really beautiful.
It seems like your knowledge and experience goes so deep that you are the person to do those, kind of like it's a collection and it has a theme, but it's not one that anyone would pick up and just decide to do.
Correct. And I didn't have as much insight until I started working on it. Imagine it took almost a year just to scan all the pages.
Yeah, I bet.
So you're waiting for the scanner to go back. You're looking at every page carefully and you're noticing things like, wow, I never saw that before. Or, wow, look at that. And so that alone kind of ramped me up as far as I was anxious to get to the next step. But I knew if I didn't get all the scans done, then I would keep having work process problems. You got to make the plan sometimes and stick to the plan.
Right. Be systematic about it. Otherwise you get lost.
You got to have the raw scans, and then you got to hide a copy someplace in case you make a mistake.
Yes, that too.
And I have made a bunch of mistakes where I've been disgusted and walked away for a couple of days before I've come back and fixed it.
Especially with the amount of painstaking time I'm sure it takes to do a page.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think I've mentioned, but I used to do it page. Well, now I do 5 or 6 pages at a time. So I'll do strengthen all the lines on 5 or 6 pages. Then I'll go back and I'll do the next step on 5 or 6 pages.
Okay.
It seems to make it go quicker, but that could be an illusion on my part.
Yeah, I've experimented with stuff like that too in my own comic work. It's like, well, maybe this character has this color palette. I should just do this character, with every panel, or do I do it panel by panel? And I don't know if it makes it better or worse, or if you just play these games with yourself to keep your brain engaged.
Yes, and some days I play heavy metal, and some days I play jazz for music, loud. My oldest son, I have 2 grown sons. My oldest son one year gave me an external hard drive of all the music he had, and I plugged that into the back of the computer wherever I'm working at. And 5 years later, I'm still discovering things I've never heard before musically.
Oh, wow.
So if I'm bored with something, I can go hunt for something new and listen to it while I'm working.
Yeah, no shortage now between your massive hard drive and the internet.
Well, yeah. But if you don't even know what is out there, how do you ask Spotify for something?
That's true. Yeah, you want to find something new, you don't know what to search for.
Right. because I was using Spotify just listening to my music from my teenage years, like The Who and The Doors and 10 Years After. I don't even know if you know who 10 Years After is.
That one I didn't know, no.
Yeah. Vanilla Fudge. I bet you haven't heard of Vanilla Fudge.
I have not, no, sorry.
Or Uriah Heep. This really dates me, so I'm sorry.
Well, that's very cool.
Yeah. What else can I answer for you?
I'm sure I'll have a million questions like 2 minutes after we hang up. So I think what we should do is maybe in a few months from now, when you're getting a little bit closer, if you want to do this again, we can promote whatever you want to promote. And
yeah, let's do it.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Let's do it. And as I create samples and stuff, if you send me a mailing address, I'll send you some copies for you.
Oh, excellent. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time. Thanks for letting me ramble on about the Micronauts.
Yeah, anytime. I appreciate you coming on. That was cool. Doing the screen share was awesome. I didn't even think about that, but that made it really brought it to life. So that was really cool. If you want to give everybody, I know you said, I just clicked on the wrong thing, singleboundstudios.com, and you mentioned to follow you on Twitter. What is your Twitter handle?
DPBanks67.
Okay. And anything else you wanted to plug or promote or get out there?
Nope, that's only two things I do right now.
Keep it simple. It's the way to do it.
I got this project here I'm working on.
Right. Yeah, you got enough going on. You don't need to be juggling 15 social media accounts.
Exactly. Right.
Well, David, thanks again. That was really cool. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Take care now.
You
Bye-bye.
too. I'd like to thank David one more time for taking time out of his obviously busy schedule to come on the show to talk to us about his process of restoring the Micronauts. Check the links down in the description. He mentioned some stuff in the interview that I want to make sure to point people to. Also, make sure you like and subscribe. We have a lot more interviews, a lot more new movie coverage, unboxings, comic reviews, and it's con season coming up, so hopefully we get some con coverage for you. You're not going to want to miss out. Also, make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week, wherever you get your podcasts. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, videos, merchandise, and more. We love hearing feedback, so drop us a note in the comments. Leave us something on social media. All the accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. And on a more personal note, a good friend and I have our own comic series out. It's a slice-of-life comedy comic called Social Studies. It's all about the high school experience, all the insanity and ridiculousness that goes along with it. We style it after the 90s cartoons that we grew up on and inspired us. We write it like a sitcom. We're having a lot of fun with it. We're getting a lot of great feedback, so now's a good time to jump on. 9 issues currently available, 10 coming very soon. Some delays from the printers we're still dealing with, but we're still trying to churn out content for you guys, and we're always moving forward to the next thing. So find it all at socialstudiescomic.com or on Comixology. Thanks.